Hello everyone, Don here again with another update on my W.A.R Corsair project. This weekend finally turned out to be a nice weekend. Yesterday was in the 70s, started out raining. Today it's been pretty much overcast but warm. In the garage today it actually ended up hitting 92 degrees for a high, but the humidity was only about 35%, so it was just uncomfortably warm but not humid. So I've been at a couple of things here in the past couple of weeks. First thing I did was I took the linkages for the flap controls out, all the push rods that went through these bell cranks. There's one here, one on the inner truss assembly, and it goes up into the fuselage to the flap motor, which is behind the seat. None of those rods were treated with anything. They weren't painted. They were just bare 4130 steel. So I pulled, so you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different push rods. Excuse me. Had to pull them all out, strip them down. There was a little surface rust, and then I zinc plated them, and then I gave them a nice olive drab coating on them. This is one of the tubes here. See, it's a nice olive drab finish. It's pretty dark. So they all look like that. This is, and then so taking them apart, some of the parts for the gear door mechanisms, these are painted. I'm going to end up stripping these down and doing them all in this olive drab chromate finish. So, and then another thing I never finished was I never riveted these bearings on to these. So I pulled them all out. I had already bought the rivets. So I bucked all those on all 4 of these controls, and those are the rods that physically go out to each flap. So I did all those, 4 of those. And then I was looking at the tail wheel. The problem I had with the tail wheel, when it was on the ground, the angle of the spindle for the tail wheel was leaning backwards. And what happens is when you push the plane sideways, the tail rolls. It causes the tail of the plane to do this, goes up and down, goes whoop, whoop, whoop. And when the plane's sitting on the ground, it should be vertical. So it's laid back. I took and went and leveled the aircraft, so it's true level. And then I measured the angle on it. It's about 6 degrees off of vertical in the up position. But when it's on the ground, it has to be vertical. So I did some figuring out, measured from the center of the main wheels to the center of the back wheel, did some little triangulation there, and came up with an angle of 20 degrees I needed to bend the spring, leaf spring basically. So I put it in my press, started bending it, checked it, had it like 10 degrees, bent it again, and just finished getting to where I wanted to go. Went to let off of it, and pop, the thing busted. I got it laying around here somewhere. I took it off. I can't see where I set it. Oh, here it is. Snapped it. Busted it right off. I really didn't like this spring. It seemed like it was too heavy. It's the right size, but it was just really stiff. It didn't seem to do anything. Well, it turns out the planes call for a 4340 steel, which they refer to as spring steel. And Aircraft Spruce sells it. So I'm going to order a new piece, and then I'll have to put a couple bends in that. That was an actual automotive leaf spring from a local company that builds springs up. So I tore that apart, and then there was parts of the gear to get it out. There's little turnbuckles that hook into these holes here that hook to the gear doors. As this thing folds up and down, the turnbuckles pull the doors closed. Well, the little turnbuckles I had, the holes weren't in the right position, so I had to weld them up and re-drill them. And in the process of taking it out, the way this thing bolts to the upper half, the elevator push tube goes through the center of this thing, and you couldn't get this apart. This doesn't come apart. So this was all one piece, and I cut it off to get it out of there. And then you can see what I did here. I just welded on a little half piece of tubing. So now I can put it back together, put a little bolt in there, and it's be able to remove it later on. So that's been cleaned. I'll put it in my blasting cabinet, give it a good cleaning, and then this will get, it's not be zinc plated, just be painted. I'll paint it because the rest of the tail is already white epoxy paint. So I'll repaint it, stick it back together, and then I can hook the turnbuckles up and adjust the gear doors. So that'll be done. So that was what I started on yesterday until I broke the leaf spring. So tonight I'm going to go ahead and order up the new piece of the leaf spring, order up some bolts that I need to get this back together. Some of the bolts I had in these things were too short. They were just temporary to hold things together. So I need to order about 4 bolts to get that all bolted back in, and it'll be ready for the flaps. And then what you can see here is got these little Molex connectors. When I starting with the wiring today, I'm going to need to order some more wire to wire up that instrument panel from my last video. So I'm going to need, these are 3-pin. I need to order some 2s, maybe some more 3s, 4s, because in order to pull that instrument panel out, I'm going to need quick disconnects on it if I just want to pull the panel completely out. So I've been in here trying to undo this big web. What I did is I pulled out the circuit breaker panel, and over here was the master switch panel. I pulled them out. As you can see, that one in there, it's black. And what I did is I cleaned them up real good. And here's the panels for the switches. And then what I did is I took and powder coated them. So, and then I'll make some labels or something, white labels put on it to label each one of the switches. And these are all the switches for it here. That turns everything on. The master switch turns on alternator, fuel pump, selects 1 or 2 fuel pump, nav lights, the whole works. So what I had to do is get in here, and some of this wiring was just temporary to get the thing up and running. This is the pocket down here where the computer fits. Computer sitting down in there. There's 2 relays for the 2 fuel pumps, pump 1 and 2. The landing gear switch, that's the old switch. I got a new one that is an actual toggle that you have to pull out to flip it up, pull out to flip it down, so you can't accidentally bump it when it's on the ground and have the gear fold on you. So I've been rerouting some of these wires, changing the wires, lengthening them, taking out the temporary stuff. I've got some wires here, like this one's going to be the tachometer, comes from the engine. This one is the starter wire that goes to the ignition switch. This is a power wire that goes to turn on the computer relay to fire up the engine, basically. And this will be a check engine light if I put a light in the plane, so if there's a problem with the computer, it'll turn a light on. So I've got some wire, but what I did is I ran out of little ring terminals of the correct size to finish up today. So I got to go out and pick up some of that. But I'm going to order a bunch of wire, enough to do all the instrumentation, get that done, get this whole web of messy wires cleaned up and put back together. So that's kind of where I'm at. I pulled the floor pan out. This is a folding piece that goes down over, the joystick comes through there. It was a little wide and it was rubbing on the side of that master switch panel. So I trimmed both sides down so it cleared, and then I just took it completely out so it give me room to work. So that's kind of where I'm at. Here's my powder coating setup, a little box I sprayed in. And I did a bunch of weld, and I just had this place all cleaned up, and just this weekend I pretty much trashed it. So I want to get this wiring done. I'm going to order up some connectors from, where's that place in Texas I buy from. I'm going to order a bunch of that stuff, order the wires, the bolts, the tool steel for the tail spring from Aircraft Spruce. Today I was thinking about possibly working on this epoxying up, because it is plenty warm to do it, but that's alright. I'm going to go ahead and get some of this cleaned up and get the instrument panel ready to go in, but I won't put the panel in until after this is all finished, sanded, because it's still going to be a pretty big mess in here. And here's the Canon plug. I've got 19 positions left on it, and I got to add the wires for oil pressure, oil temp, fuel pressure. That'll be inside the plane. So there's a bunch of there's still maybe close to a dozen wires I have to add to this for the instrumentation to get that all up and running. And then after this is all finished in, I have a blanket that goes on here, a fire blanket, and then a piece of stainless steel has to be cut and fitted around this whole thing. There's a fuel lines in and return, fuel pressure and return, and then you get your 4 waters in and outs to the radiators and the wings. So I'm going to go ahead and get the wiring tied up nice and tidy, that is, and get everything buttoned down, and then get this finished by adding extra wires. And then I can, this will actually come off. There's a snap ring in the back. I can take this housing off so I can get the stainless firewall on and then put it back together. And then hopefully the weather will stay this way and I can get back to finishing this up. As soon as the fuselage is done, the tail section is done, I can start putting the wing panels back on and concentrate on the wings. And as I go, I'll be painting as I go. So that's where I'm at today. It's already after 5 o'clock. I've been out here since 9 this morning. It's about 5:30. So, all right, well, that's going to do it for this week's update. The weather's going to turn crappy again, but it's going to kind of stay around the 60s. It's not going to be too bad, so I can at least keep working on this. But until it gets up over 70 and stays that way, I'm not really looking to do any of the epoxy work because it takes way. I mean, when it's over 80 degrees like today, it cures nice and fast, but if it's 70, 75, it takes over a day and you can't touch it until then. You can't work on it. So, all right, well, I appreciate everybody taking the time to watch my videos. Like always, feel free to leave comments, questions, or concerns, and I'll answer them as they come along. So, again, I guess this is going to do it for now. I'll try to start doing these every week now that the weather's finally clearing up and I can get some work going and get this back in high gear. So my goal is to get this thing done before, but hopefully before into fall, so I can at least get it out and start doing some taxi tests and maybe get a flight in before the end of the year. Who knows? It's going to depend on this weather. I mean, it's already the middle of May and it still isn't warm enough to do the stuff I need to do. All right, everyone. Thanks again for taking time watching. This will be Dino Don out.